Hey guys, it's Melissa here from melissaopen.com. Welcome to another episode of Awaken Your Inner Awesomeness, the weekly podcast devoted to all things spirituality and self-improvement. I'm so delighted you're here with us today because we have a very special guest. Today we have with us Miss Regan Caruthers. She is a writer, spiritual teacher, and she's also the founder of Aset Yoga Center. And she's here today to talk to us about how to heed to divine guidance. And she has a specific lesson that she learned while listening to divine guidance that saved her life. And so we're going to talk about that story and also learn more about her own spiritual awakening. So I want to thank you so much, Regan, for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me. We're almost neighbors.
Yes. We figured out that we geographically are probably closer than anyone else I've ever interviewed for my podcast. We're around the St. Louis area, which is awesome. So I would love for you to tell us, because you have quite an interesting story about something that happened to you not that long ago that because of divine guidance, it actually saved your life.
Yeah. Let's start there. So let me paint the picture in terms of what was going on at the time. We were still locked down. I was living in Santa Cruz, California, where I had been since the late '90s, having worked at HeartMath. That's what had brought me west in the '90s. And we didn't have a COVID house. There wasn't. My husband was like doing meetings in the living room. Anyway, and I had a book to write. So I had traveled to Joshua Tree, which is outside of Palm Springs, just to get away and, continue to write my book. And I had a certain ritual that I did every time I would sit down to write, and that's namely prayer and getting into a really receptive state for meditation. So here I am in the high desert, just thinking I was going to write my book and have some, alone time that I felt I had really earned. And this fateful night in meditation, the voice that I knew and trusted said that I had to urgently move home. Well, as you know, home is St. Louis, right? I live on Monterey Bay. I have this beautiful home right on the beach. And I do what I'm told. So I literally came out of meditation, checked to see if I had enough bars to make a phone call, and called a friend in St. Louis who was a realtor. And I said, Andrea, God says I have to move home urgently, and I do what I'm told. And I told her that I was going to fly out of Palm Springs in the morning. My husband was like, I'm not getting in the way of you and God. Like, go, do what you need to do. And so I arrived in St. Louis to look, for my home, knowing that I needed to, move from where I had been for 25 years and move quickly. Get to St. Louis. I'm looking around. Nothing feels right. Again, in meditation, I'm told Franklin County. And I literally don't know what that means. And I say to my friend, the realtor, I'm like, we're supposed to be looking in Franklin County. Anyway, so I find my home where I am. I have 10 acres, gorgeous place. And so I get the call to urgently move home in December. And I'm here in March, back in Missouri. My children think, my youngest was like, Mom, I don't know who you talk to, but I don't know why they would say this because, we're in rural Missouri. Anyway, get all moved in, trying to get acclimated to my new community. I begin to design my yoga center out of this big outbuilding on my estate. And again, I pray and meditate every day. That's my jam. And this was now June. And I'm told in meditation that I need to urgently go to a doctor. So urgent is in both directives. I don't go to Western doctors. That would be a whole other podcast. But again, I do what I'm told. So I found a country doctor, Craig Wholesome, here in Washington. Saw him the next day because thankfully in the country, you can see a doctor quickly. And what do doctors do? They listen to your heart, like after hello almost, right? And he listens and he says, Regan, you have a really loud murmur. And he looks very concerned. He said, we need to get you scheduled for an echocardiogram as soon as possible, which was the next day. So an echocardiogram is an ultrasound of your heart, looks at, basically from a gross macro perspective, how it's functioning. And yeah, I get the results the following day of the echo, and that's when I learn I'm dying. And I had a birth defect in my heart, born with a broken heart, which when your listeners get to know my story, they'll understand that. And it required that I have open heart surgery as quickly as they could get it scheduled. Now, thankfully, Barnes Hospital in St. Louis, which I'm sure you're aware, which is where I was born and where my oldest son was born.
Where my children were born also.
Well, it just happens to be one of the best places in the world for the surgery that I needed, which is why God told me to urgently move home. And yeah, and so I had open heart surgery in July of 22. So, just to recap, was told to urgently move home in December of 21, got here in March, learned I was dying in June, had open heart surgery in July. And that was on a Friday morning, and I was home on Tuesday.
Wow.
And come Tuesday, my day of discharge, and my surgeon, Ralph Damiano, who runs all cardiothoracic surgery services at Barnes, one of the best surgeons ever, came to see me on my day of going home. And he said, Regan, there's no clinical explanation of you. Clinically, there's no explanation of how you were alive prior to this. It was the worst aortic valve he'd ever seen. I had just about a toothpick of diameter, room for blood to flow, as opposed to the $50 that it typically is. And when he told me that, I said, "Do you believe in Jesus Christ?" I said, and I asked that from a wide point of view, not from a traditional Christian. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's just not my thing. And he said, "Well, I do." I said, "Well, that's the only explanation I have." Come April, after I fully recovered from life-threatening heart inflammation post-surgery, and I was at a funeral for a friend in Florida, and I was getting ready to go to the beach after the service, and I'm so fully sad because this guy was such a good friend. He was a Christian mystic friend of mine. Anyway, I look in the mirror, getting ready to go to the beach. I don't have any clothes on. I'm like, my scar looks different. And I get closer to the mirror, and sure enough, I have a cross on my chest. I don't know when the scar changed shape. Maybe it was that day. I have no idea. And when I showed it to my surgeon, he wept. He
Wow.
said, "Well, Regan, that's another miracle. There's no horizontal cutting, it's a vertical cut."
That's insane.
So we could start there.
Yeah. I like to call those things God winks,
Oh,
you know,
yeah,
when
that's kind of an
left,
understatement, I think.
yeah, left these little proof, that yes,
Yeah,
I
I
exist.
don't know if you can see it.
Oh, yeah. That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
What a story. But I know that you are a believer because in, your biography that I was reading about you, you started taking martial arts at 3, right? Correct?
Oh, no, not martial arts. I attended a school beginning at the age of 3, where we meditated every day
Okay, that's what it was.
and did Tai Chi, which is an ancient form of mindful movement. Yeah, and photographed our energy field with Carillion film and sang
That's
songs
what
about.
sort of started you with the meditation, but then you shut it off. You
I sure did.
Well, when did you start to open back up again? Because I feel like a lot of people do that. I feel we're all born with these abilities. And then because of what we're learned, society tells us, no, you're just imagining things or that's not real. We shut it off. So when did you start to open back up to your abilities?
Well, I didn't try. I mean, at the age of 9, when I commanded my access to stop, it was in response um, to really dark energy and to entities that I would see that really scared me. And I had had enough. Yeah, so the veil came down. And then at 27, another paint a picture, I'm a junior executive in the publishing industry. I'm at a national sales meeting. I have no practice. I have been so cut off from the wisdom teachings of my youth, um, from the access that I just was born with. And to your point, that we're all born with, mine just seemed to be, um, I don't know, pretty intense. Anyway, so I'm at this meeting and I have no practice. I mean, I'm a good person, I'm kind, but I'm, trying to climb the corporate mountaintop. I thought, material success would lead to safety. Um, my best friend comes to the meeting. She brings a book for me as a gift, Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. And as I'm smoking my cigarette and getting ready to go, present to shadowy executives, I open the book and it's, Christ consciousness, this and that. And I look at Heidi and I say, I love you, but I don't have time for this. Okay, so that's the context. That's Regan at 27. Um, this fateful evening, I decide I just need to get some sleep. Heidi goes out to party in San Francisco because that's where I am. That's where this meeting is. I just want to sleep. And I go to bed early. And sometime in the middle of the night, I think it was about 1 a.m., I woke up just with terror in my system. Felt very much like I used to feel as a kid. And before I opened my eyes, I knew someone was in my room. And what was scary about that is I had learned from a mentor that she had recently been raped and we're in this very toxic work environment. Anyway, I just knew someone was there and I opened my eyes. And sure enough, the entity that used to terrorize me as a little girl was at the end of my bed. And I just literally sat up in bed, looked at him because he looked like a man, basically, kind of fiery and sort of devilly. And I just looked at him and said, "Oh, it's you. It's only you. I'm not afraid of you." And I went back to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, all I could feel was divine presence and unconditional love. And those were feelings that had predominated my young life. So all I wanted to do was to communicate with my mom, back in St. Louis. She was a magnificent person, but she couldn't regulate her access. And I just wanted to tell her how I felt and what I knew because I didn't know how long it was going to last. I had such insight into her, into everything, and I felt nothing but love and forgiveness that I don't have words for. I had a lot of trauma growing up. My mother was quote unquote mentally ill. Um, anyway, I couldn't reach her. The only person I could reach was my stepdad, who was basically the epicenter, if you will, of most of my trauma as a kid. He was violent and he was emotionally abusive, and all I could feel was love. And I told him so, and I told him that I forgave him, and that I understood that anything that he did was just an expression of what had been done to him, right? The trauma that lived in his system, and that I just had nothing but love. And I also said to him, the only reason we exist is to learn to love. There's no other purpose. We about X, Y, ain't. I just knew that. I mean, I just knew it as I can't even, communicate the profundity of what was going on in my system that morning. Anyway, he drops the phone and he comes back a couple of seconds later after me, sharing all of this. And he said, "Well, Blonde Beauty, I don't have an explanation for this, but a golden eagle just landed on the crabapple tree in the backyard." And then he's looking at this tree and I hear the phone shuffle again. He comes back. He said, "Again, I don't know. I don't understand what I'm seeing. There's now a red fox at the base of the tree looking up at the eagle." Well, he's got Comanche bloodlines. So I think that's what, he needed to help him kind of process what was happening. The eagle, being the symbol of the divine in indigenous culture, particularly in Native American culture. And the red fox is a noble messenger. anyway, from that moment on, and that was over 30 years ago, this violent man has been nothing but kind and gentle. So the energy that I was connected to, which basically was the love of God, um, yeah, healed him.
Wow. That's incredible also.
Yeah, that's why I finally wrote my book.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your book.
And story. And I don't include everything. Um, Writing a memoir in some ways is challenging, because it impacts other people.
Mhm.
You don't live alone.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, so and I've had a little bit of blowback, frankly, about it, which is okay, kind of expected. I just wanted, my reader to be inspired and to have hope, and that you can learn how to embody the love of God. It's something you can learn, um, because it's what you are. And, we're in a process when we come here of forgetting and ideally remembering. So my story is in service to that and to share the mess, right? Like, even though I had had this exceptional education as a kid, right? And staff at the Heart Math Institute and this glorious career in Silicon Valley, like whatever. Um, Life was still messy, even post awakening, right? I still made misaligned choices. And that's, what I also want my readers to understand. There's no perfection in this. And, some days you can really embody your divine nature and other days you can't. But the point is to keep trying, right? And to have enough discipline in yourself and your practice that on a tough day, you know what to do. And you choose to do it, right? Discipline, unlike motivation, like when you're motivated to do it. Discipline is you do it when you don't want to, right? And that is really important in terms of sitting in your own inner quiet and learning how to then pull in the energy of divine love, bring it in and sit with it. And in that process, you get acquainted with all the things that are in the way, right? The traumatic memories, the judgments, the ways that these traumatized parts of ourselves, um, they have a belief system, right? They have a point of view, and they're not wrong, right? They believe what they believe, and they cope the way they cope for really good reason. But what I've learned and what I share in my story is, you got to learn to love the darkness that's inside of you, and in so doing, right, when you truly learn how to do that, then you can truly be compassionate. You can truly forgive because you've allowed all of that first within yourself. Yeah. So, yeah, Tragic Magic is, about my life, the mess, and how I finally um, became disciplined. And I will say, it's the discipline of practice that really, helped kind of smooth things out.
If we have people out there listening who maybe feel like they don't get messages or they're not hearing the divine, how would you what advice could you give them maybe for how to distinguish between what's that noise that we all hear and what is truly the divine guidance?
Yeah, well, first I'd ask them, how long are you meditating?
Mhm.
Like, what are you doing truly? And I would think probably 9 times out of 10, most people aren't doing much. And again, no judgment. It's just the truth. Life is busy and we're all trying to survive this crazy, corrupt, system that we find ourselves in, so a lot of people would rather just grab a glass of wine. And I get it. But if they are truly in practice, right? They're meditating, they're praying, and they're still not receiving, I would tell them, keep going, keep doing it. And when they do either have a felt sense of something or maybe they hear something, we're all different how we connect with this guidance. The way that you cultivate discernment about it is you experiment, right? So you have a felt sense of something and you act upon that and you don't have a good outcome. Well, maybe you need to then go back to that moment when you thought you should do X, right? And remember what was the felt experience of it? What did it sound like? So that you know that when that comes again, maybe that's not it, maybe that's something else. What I will say, like even in those dramatic moments of being told to urgently move home, right? To urgently go to the doctor, there was no fear in the transmission. And there was no fear in how I received it either. So, again, it's hard for me to tell somebody what it sounds like, what it feels like. You just have to experiment, have the courage to experiment, and then work backwards to begin to develop that discernment. Yeah, I'd been at it a long time. I mean, even going back to junior high, I was on the way to the orthodontist with my mom, and that inner guidance, that voice said, you need to repeat the ninth grade. Now, again, I was like ahead of myself and I was bullied and I wasn't developing the way that my peers were. And so I just told my mother who was driving, I said, Mom, I need to stay back and repeat the ninth grade. And she's like, well, honey, I don't know a thing about that, but you have my full support. Anyway, I gave a presentation to the Parkway Board of Education because there was no mechanism to hold a straight A student back. And I convinced them. And that was a turning point in my life. So again, for me, that's just an example of heeding the call, having a really positive, transformative outcome, and then knowing by working backwards in time what that voice sounds like and what the feeling resonance of the counsel is. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And that requires a lot of trust on your part, which I think is where people have the most problem. I think a lot of people don't trust themselves. So when they get guidance, sometimes it's easy for them to say, well, that can't be correct. How do we work on trusting more?
Well, disengage first from all. That would be one thing I would suggest, because the reason people don't trust themselves is they've been taught not to. And, the forces that run this planet don't want you to know that you're divine and eternal. Because when you know that, first of all, you can really sense bullshit and you're not afraid. And, you know, they want you, and then you disconnected from yourself. So, that requires you to behave differently, right? Be the one the strange one, right? That
Mhm.
is, doesn't have a television or, doesn't constantly look on their phones. I mean, I have a presence on Instagram now, but boy, I don't really want to, but it's just like, that's, kind of where we are, but I don't spend all my time, doom scrolling. So anyway, you got to change your behavior and you got to kind of be the outlier, be the one that isn't living the conventional norms, because the conventional norms are why you don't trust. Spend more time in nature,
I agree.
spend more time in meditation, and frankly, pray. Whatever higher wisdom you think is available, whether you call that God or universe, whatever that is, it's important to ask for help. We all have help. We all have unseen, help we can't see, whether it's ancestors or our guides or our guardian angels. But kind of like the prime directive in Star Trek, they won't get involved without your permission, really. So, every day before meditation when I pray, I pray for my highest good. I pray to live my highest timeline. I ask for the insights, the resources, and the people to come forth to support that. And I call in ancestors of the highest vibration and intention, my guides, my guardians, and Yeshua, Jesus, and Mary Magdalene. I just say, hey, help me do it. And tell me, right? I mean, that is the surrender part, right? It's like, tell me what is in my highest to do.
I think, you know, a lot of people probably experience this, but I know in my own life, there are often times when I just try to just keep going and do everything myself. And then something happens that forces me to surrender
Mhm.
and to slow down and say, okay, this is beyond me. So I need help with this. But if we would just ask that every single day and stop trying to carry the world on our shoulders and realize we have a whole team out there to help us and support, it would be a lot easier.
Yeah, and that is also what catalyzes hearing more guidance, right? Because more guidance is coming because you said, "Hey, guide me." But, it's also about, I mean, imagine trying to have a really important conversation with someone in a really loud room.
Yeah.
So that's why practice is so important, so that you're cultivating the inner conditions. You're asking for help, but you have enough quiet in your system that you can actually hear,
Yeah.
because they may be trying to guide you, but it's like, hello, it's like they're having to,
Yes.
yeah. And then sometimes you do get hit on the head,
Yeah.
to your point, sometimes um, there's no other way.
Yeah. Like we've been trying to get your attention.
Yeah. So here you go.
Yeah.
But I do find, at least in my own life, the more you listen and the more you do as they direct, the more that just becomes kind of just second nature. That's just how you operate as a human. And so it doesn't feel like it's effort, right? And it doesn't feel hard.
Yeah.
But, like anything, it's like you wouldn't pick up a violin and expect to play it.
Yeah. That is true. I mean, it does take a lot of practice and especially in discerning, what is from spirit and what is not, because it's never going to be fear-based. That's one thing like I've always learned. So,
Yeah. When they said you need to urgently move home, it was like you had pizza for lunch,
yeah.
right? I mean, it was
Yeah.
just very matter of fact, but very clear. And the feeling quality of it was uncompromising.
I love that comparison. I mean, I think that's very much uh, down to earth. We can all relate to, getting a message like that. How do you work with people? Like, if anyone is sitting here listening to you speaking and maybe they want to get a copy of your book, or maybe they would like to work with you or follow you, what is it that
Sure.
you offer for people?
Yeah. So, well, if they happen to be in the St. Louis metro area, they can come and see me at my center. So they can do that. That's you can read about it on regancaruthers.com. So that's when people can learn, a little bit more just about me and what I do. I'm pretty selective, but I do have what I call inner life clients. So on my website, you can schedule a discovery call, and that's complimentary. and kind of tune in because I really, yeah, I want to help and I can't help everybody. And there's a certain amount of readiness, frankly, that people need to have to, yeah, because there's a lot I can do in that time, right? So I want to make sure it matters both for my client and for me. Can I truly deliver, you know? So we figure that out on the discovery call. So that's one way people can work with me. They can become, you know, an inner life coaching client. And if they want to just learn more about my story and some of my prayers and practices, things that I have learned along the way are in my book, Tragic Magic. And that's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And then if they just want to follow me on Instagram or Facebook, I try to publish about 4 videos a week, you know, just something that's in my heart that I want to share. And that's just at my name, Regan Caruthers, on Instagram or Facebook. And I try to post whatever I'm posting on both platforms.
Okay, and we will have those links also in the show notes. So if you're listening and you're in the car and you think, oh, I need to remember that, don't worry about it. You can come back to it and just click on the link and it'll take you right there. I want to thank you so much for being here with us today and for sharing your story because that's incredible. And I encourage people to go buy your book because uh, if just what you shared with us, just a little snippet of your life was fantastic and amazing. So thank you again for being here with us today and for what you're doing for people.
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me. Grateful for our time.
I want to thank all of you for being here with us today as well. If you like this podcast, please subscribe. Please leave a positive review from wherever you're listening. And don't forget, if you're listening to this podcast, you can see the video on New Reality TV. So go over there and check it out. I hope you guys have an amazing week. I am sending you so much love and light, and I will talk to you soon. Bye, guys.